Hi, and welcome to the most recent video in our AI Basics series. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how a simple chat can unlock the potential of any dataset. With just a few short prompts, you'll be able to extract trends and insights quickly and easily. The use of AI tools like ChatGPT is becoming more and more common, and data analysis is one of the most popular and powerful use cases for these tools. In this video, we'll be teaching a flexible method for approaching data analysis with ChatGPT that can be utilized whether you're a novice or an experienced data analyst. You will need to upload data to ChatGPT for it to analyze it, obviously. Luckily, it does handle most file types, but it is worth keeping in mind that ChatGPT may use some of the data for training purposes, so you may not want to use data that is highly sensitive or privileged. I'll talk a bit more later about an alternative which will allow you to do the same analysis with a bit more privacy. If you'd like some sample data to practice these skills on, recommend going to kaggle.com where they have all kinds of sample data sets. I'll go ahead and download a couple different ones for myself to use. You may notice that a lot of these are designed with educational purposes, so they have actual exercises that you can go through here to test your analysis skills. Now that we have some data, we're ready for our first prompt, which will handle preparing the data to be analyzed. With any prompt, you want to start with a clear instruction, which here is help me prepare this data for analysis. After that, I go into a bit more detail on how it can help me by evaluating the data so that there aren't any errors that are going to get in the way of us getting a good result. Hopping over to ChatGPT, go ahead and drag in the data here. You can also use the attach button, and then copy in my prompt. You can see here that it puts my dataset in a little window here, which is nice, and then it spits out some evaluation. It starts here by explaining its process, which is great in case I want to actually understand what's going on and not just receive information. It does seem it jumps the gun here with the graphs, but otherwise it gives me a ton of useful information on the data in my set here. Actually lets me know at the bottom that the set is already pretty clean. There's no significant data entry errors, but it gives me details on the data we do have in case there are things that could be errors based on context. On this context here, the outliers it's describing don't sound problematic, so we should be ready to move on. Since I feel satisfied with the state of the data, I can go ahead and get started with analysis with the most simple possible approach by just asking it to please analyze the data. Even with a purposely oversimplified request, it's giving me a ton of useful information. Here at the top, we have, again, an explanation of its process, which is great for if we're using this to learn. You can see it's not only giving me the correlations and relationships between the data points, but it's also giving me insights about what those correlations could mean. This is a big part of what makes this process so powerful for beginners. You don't necessarily need to know what to ask for just to get meaningful information, and if there are any parts of the analysis that you could use further clarification on, you can always just ask ChatGPT to explain further. As an example, I asked it here to further explain the regression analysis. It then not only gives me a bunch of detailed information on what a regression analysis is, but it also puts it into the context of the data we're looking at. This super simple strategy of just having an organic conversation with ChatGPT about your data will not only help with extracting insights and trends, but also teach you a lot about the data analysis itself. The best way to learn more about this process is really just to try it for yourself. If you do find at any point that you get stuck and you don't know what question to ask, ChatGPT will even suggest potential prompts for you to try next above the prompt window. If you feel ready to move beyond the basic approach, ChatGPT does have a bunch of features for more advanced data analysis, and we'll look at a few of those right now. First, we will look at merging datasets for when you have data on one topic spread across multiple files, but you want to look at them together. Then we can look at applying specific models and frameworks for analysis for when we want to have ChatGPT go a specific way about the analysis rather than it choosing for us. And finally, we'll take a look at ChatGPT's powerful ability to create different graphs and charts to help us visualize our data. First, let's jump into combining data sets. So here I can drag the entire folder of the pizza data we got earlier. You can see it put all the files in the folder into my prompt window here. And then I can simply ask to please help me combine these data sets. And I'm going to tell it a little bit about why I want to combine them to help guide its process. You can see it pops up the little windows for the datasets like it did before, and it's getting started analyzing. It's worth noting that I did speed a lot of this footage up for the sake of the video, so don't be too surprised if it does take a little bit longer for you. It's normal for it to take some extra time for complicated analysis. So it's starting out with some details about the different data sets I gave it, describing the variables and whatnot, and then it spits out our new combined data set. It's always important to check ChatGPT's work for mistakes right off the bat here. It seems like it is organized in some other way than I would like. We see the order details ID and the order IDs going in seemingly random order here. I remember from looking at the datasets earlier that order details ID is a unique value, so I'll go ahead and ask it to reorganize the data by that variable. And it immediately spits out that fixed data set. You can see that it seemed to have kept the old index, which isn't really doing anything for us, so I'll go ahead and ask it to please remove the old index, and I'll specify where it is just to make sure it doesn't get confused. And after not too long, it spits out the fully fixed data set. Again, we don't want to just take for granted that it's doing everything correctly, so let's reference this against one of our other data sets. Go to the order details where the order details ID came from, and we can see that at least the first entries that I can see are the same in between the two data sets, at least as far as the order details ID relates to the pizza ID. So I feel pretty good about moving on to some analysis. When looking for specific models and frameworks to use, I did find that a lot of the beginner info was locked behind courses, but I did find some nice business analysis oriented stuff on Strategy Capstone. And there's actually an active community on Kaggle, which we looked at earlier, and can be a great resource for general data science and science related analysis. With that out of the way, let's try to apply some of what we learned. This is pizza sales data, so it seems like it makes sense to try to do a predictive sales analysis, so I'll ask for that. Go ahead and close my data window here since I don't need it anymore. Let ChatGPT do its thing. And we get a nice chart here of our already existing daily sales. I actually sped this part up quite a bit because it was taking a while to finish its analysis, but once it's done, it lets me know that it's actually made a model for predicting future sales. It wants to know if I want any predictions done, so I just tried to ask, please predict sales for the next 3 months. Does a little bit more analysis here, and it eventually spits out something that looks a bit odd. Not exactly what I asked for, but I will go back to that as it's sort of a topic in and of itself. Let's move on to do another type of analysis here. I'll ask for a SWOT analysis, which is a really common type of analysis for business. I actually know that we don't have everything that we would need for a proper SWOT analysis, so I ask it to let me know what type of data I can gather to make this analysis even better. Even with just the information we had, it was able to give me the 4 components of our SWOT, which is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it let me know what data I can gather to improve the analysis, specifically local industry data and competitor data, which is what I was expecting. But this is a great example of how ChatGPT as a guide to help you figure out what kind of information you need to get the answers that you want. Now let's see if we can troubleshoot what happened with our sales prediction. Looking at the data, looks like the values are way too low based on the historical data. It had a minimum of 75 sales in a day, and it was showing pretty regularly 14 here. Not only that, but it only did the first 5 days. So we're going to take advantage of a cool feature of ChatGPT, which is the edit message button, which allows me to jump into the middle of the conversation and start a new branch, even though I breezed past this on my original conversation. So we'll hop in and point out those 2 mistakes that we mentioned earlier, the incomplete prediction and the weirdly low values, and it will start trying to figure out what happened. It ends up actually going through a multi-step process here, where first it figures out that there was something wrong with the prediction model, and when it tries to fix it, it finds out that there's just something wrong with the model at a deeper level, so it suggests a different option. The ARIMA it mentions does seem like a good fit for our use case here, so I let it go along with that. And it ends up giving me a much more realistic looking analysis. It just goes to show it's important to double check ChatGPT's work, but luckily it is pretty good at fixing its own mistakes. And now for our final main technique, which is visualization. For this section, I use this website here as a reference, the R Graph Gallery, which has a collection of a bunch of different data analysis graphs that you can use as inspiration. It is based around charts made with the R programming language, but that is the kind of thing that ChatGPT understands pretty well. Alright, so let's try these out for ourselves. Go ahead and drag in the clean data and the predicted sales data that we made earlier, and we're going to ask ChatGPT to combine these together and make a graph showing the two together. These two data sets are structured a little differently, but I feel pretty confident that ChatGPT will be able to figure out. While it can't do everything, it's often a good idea to try and give it challenging tasks and see if it can do it. And lo and behold, it gave me exactly what I asked for. I can tell from the values that this is the right data, and we can tell from our visualization here that the predicted sales are a lot more normalized than the real ones, and we should probably take those with a grain of salt. My final example I actually forgot to record while I was doing it, but it ended up being pretty interesting, so I did still want to run through it. I start by bringing in that same cleaned pizza data, and I ask for a distribution chart of all the pizza types ordered over time. The first graph definitely had too much going on, so I had it split the graph into two, one for vegetarian pizzas and another for meat pizzas. Also partially just to see if it could do it. And it actually ended up doing a really good job. The original data did have the ingredients for the pizza in one of the files, so it likely was using that data or just inferred based on the names. I still felt that these graphs were too busy, so I instead asked it to remake them with only the top 5 pizzas in each category, but I still wanted the perspective of the total pizzas, so I wanted a gray bar with the total pizzas behind each bar. I was pretty happy with the result of this, but I did notice that the gray bars for each graph looked exactly the same, and I immediately realized that I had asked for it to make the gray bar the total pizzas ordered and not the total pizzas of each respective category. I point this out to ChatGPT and ask it to remake the graphs one more time, and we end up with some pretty good looking graphs that show the most popular pizzas against the total pizzas. I can double check ChatGPT here by checking the total values. So before it showed the total pizzas as 4,000, and now it shows us as the total of each category as 1,000 and 3,000 respectively. So looks good. Before we finish up here, I did want to mention a couple advanced options, mainly the custom GPTs option in ChatGPT. It allows you to make a custom assistant with special instructions, and importantly for this use case, it allows you to upload knowledge that it continue to work with. So if you have a data set that you are going to be using a lot, this is a great option for having a custom assistant that specializes in that data. If you're working with data that is highly sensitive or privileged, it's worth checking out OpenWebUI, which is an open source alternative to ChatGPT that is actually hosted on your own hardware. So if you have stuff that you don't want to upload to the internet, you can still do this cool AI work while keeping all of that information private. They even have options for custom models just like ChatGPT. If any of this sounds interesting, definitely check out our other video on how to set up OpenWebUI. And that's everything you need to know to get started doing data analysis with generative AI. This is ultimately a huge topic, so I definitely recommend doing a bit of experimentation on your own, as well as some personal research on methods and types of analysis that can be useful to you. As you do so, definitely share your experiences with us down in the comments, and if you end up having questions, feel free to reach out to us there or on our website. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.